So what was it you wanted to talk about?
It's this metaphysics problem. From philosophy class.
Metaphysics. The study of reality.
Right.
So what's the problem?
I'm worried that things don't exist. If they do exist, I don't understand how they exist.
Go on.
It's like this. Things are made of matter, right? But that means they're just particles. So take that chair over there, for example.
It's just a bunch of particles.
My professor used the word set. A set of particles.
Okay. So, what's the problem exactly?
The problem is that you can't change any member of a set and still have the same set. Say I have a set of marbles in a jar, and then I take out one marble. Now
you have a different set of marbles.
And even if I replace it, it's still a different set of marbles. Unless I replace it with an exact same marble, so that chair over there is just a set of particles. That's what it is.
You're saying that it's matter, and therefore it's a set of particles, and therefore it is that exact set of particles.
Right.
And so the whole thing disappears if you remove just one particle.
Right. If you pull the chair across the floor, it will lose a few particles, and then the whole chair will be gone, because then it will be a new set.
And, in general, if you take away a single molecule,
a single electron,
the entire set, and therefore the entire chair,
is gone. There's no chair there anymore. Or there is, but it's a new chair altogether.
So if what you're saying is true, either chairs don't exist, or where we think there is one chair, there are actually many.
And it gets even weirder. We are made of matter, so if you cut off a single hair, or scratch your arm, the set of particles that is you, would be gone.
And our particles are always changing. We're always getting new cells, losing old ones, breathing in and out.
So I'm not the same person I was when we started this conversation.
Or even when you started that sentence.
A dozen versions of me could come and go in the time it takes to say a single word. And, let me ask you this. Didn't I see you eating a cookie at lunch?
Yeah, I ate a cookie. I like cookies.
I don't think so. You may like cookies, but you've never eaten one, and you never will.
Well.
As soon as you take a bite, the cookie is gone.
Okay, so I can eat the new cookie that replaces it, right?
No way. The most you could do is eat a part of it, and then a part of the next one.
I could eat it all at once.
Still impossible. By the time it gets to your mouth, it's lost particles. While you're chewing it, its particles are changing.
If what you're saying is correct, then it's impossible to eat a cookie.
It's only possible to partially eat a cookie, and then partially eat another one, and another one, and another and another.
Well, when I try to eat a cookie, I tend to experience it as one cookie. And common sense says I can eat a cookie. Maybe that experience and that common sense are enough.
Maybe. My professor did say something about common sense and experience. So, anyway, that's the problem. Things exist. We know they exist, right? And what you said, common sense, says they exist, right? And common sense says there's only one you and one me, and we exist over time even when our particles change. Common sense says there's only one chair.
And common sense says I can eat a cookie.
But since things are made of matter, and since the set doesn't change its members and stay the same set, it looks like common sense is wrong. And it looks like nothing exists.
Or too many things.
So, what do you say about this problem?
Well, I've read a few things. I might have something to say.
I was hoping you did. Let's hear it. First, let me run this by you.
Okay.
Does the soul help? What if we have a soul? Doesn't that explain how we could exist over time?
Let me first ask you this. Would the soul help explain how cookies and chairs can exist over time?
No. They still don't exist very long. The soul only helps with us.
Okay, so you're asking if the soul can help? Well, do you think the soul is what exists over time, even though the body is always changing?
Honestly, I don't even know if I think there is such a thing as the soul. It's just an idea I wanted to try out.
Well, it doesn't help us eat cookies anyway.
Right.
Well, let me ask you this. If the soul exists over time, is it then not made of matter?
I guess not. No, the soul would have to be a non-physical thing.
So we exist over time because we have immaterial, that is, non-physical souls. The body doesn't exist over time, but our souls do, and so we do too?
Right. That's the idea.
So what are we exactly? Are we souls?
Yeah, at least that's the idea.
But, are you a human being?
Yes.
But you're a soul.
Right.
Just a soul, not a body.
That's the idea, right?
But you're a human being.
Yes, of course.
You're not, for example, a penguin.
No. No, I am not a penguin.
But could you be a penguin? I mean, if you were, would you still be you?
No.
But if all you are is a soul, then what prevents you from being a penguin? Let's say God takes your soul and disconnects it from your body and connects it to a penguin instead. Then you would be a penguin, right?
Maybe.
At any rate, you wouldn't be a human anymore.
I suppose not.
But you are a human, right?
I sure am.
And you couldn't be anything else and still be you, right?
Right. I'd be something else, and someone else if I weren't a human.
So
I guess I cannot be just a soul.
So, what are you?
I guess, if we're still trying to keep the soul.
And we are, at least for the sake of this line of thinking.
Then I guess I'm a combination of a soul and a body.
But that means you have two main parts. A body and
a soul.
And one of those parts is the body.
Yeah.
And it also has parts. All those particles we were just talking about.
Oh, the particles are still a part of me if I am a combination of body and soul.
So your parts are still changing when the particles change.
So we still have the same problem. I still can't exist over time. Without the soul, I'm just one bunch of particles after another. With the soul, I'm just one bunch of soul and particles after another bunch of soul and particles.
Well, that's what it looks like at the moment.
So the soul doesn't help at all.
Don't give up on the soul too quickly. It might turn out to help more than you think. But before we can talk about the soul anymore, I think there are some other things we need to talk about. Challenge about sets of particles reminded me of some of the metaphysical puzzles I've read about. They all involve something called material constitution.
Okay, what is material constitution?
The constitution of a thing is what it's made of. If a thing has material constitution, that means it's made of matter.
Okay.
So you have a nice puzzle of material constitution, which I had not heard of. But I know of some other puzzles you should also know about.
More confusion? Bring it on.
Okay, so the first puzzle is the ship of Theseus.
That sounds familiar. I think we were going to do that one in class on Monday.
It was the ship the ancient Greeks said Theseus returned to Athens in, after he defeated the Minotaur.
So this is an old puzzle.
Very old. They say the Athenians kept the ship for a long time, and they kept replacing the pieces of it, one piece at a time. So the philosophers used it as an example. At least, I think that's what I read in, Plutarch.
Okay.
Anyway, say you replace the entire ship, one piece of wood per day.
Okay.
After you replace all the pieces, you still have the same ship, right?
Yeah, I think so.
But all of its parts are gone.
They are.
So it's a completely new ship.
Well, I guess it looks like that.
So it's not the same ship.
I suppose not.
So it's both the old ship and a new ship.
So, as usual, I'm confused.
It happens. Now, say the Athenians take the whole thing apart, all at once, and put it together again, all on the same day.
It's the same ship.
It looks like it. That means the ship is the same thing as its parts.
Right.
But if you do it one piece at a time, and replace each piece as you go, it looks like the ship is not the same thing as its parts. And it gets better. Say the Athenians replace the ship of Theseus, one piece per day. But they also put a new ship together, one piece per day, using the old parts.
So then where is the original ship when they've finished?
It looks like it's the one with the original parts. But it also looks like it's the one with the new parts. So now we have two ships of Theseus, and each of them is the original ship.
But that's impossible. One of them is not the original ship.
But which one?
I have no idea.
And that's just one of the puzzles. Are you ready for another one?
Okay, I am already pretty confused. Why not add more confusion? Bring it on. Wait. Don't bring it on yet. What's your answer? Are you as confused about this as I am?
Sorry. I can't answer that question.
Why?
For two reasons. First, my answer would involve hylomorphism, and
Hello, what?
hylomorphism.
Which is?
I can't tell you yet,
Why?
because it probably wouldn't make any sense yet.
Huh?
We have to go through another puzzle and some other answers to the puzzles. Then we'll get to hylomorphism.
Oh, okay.
And the other reason is that I'm not really sure what my answer is. I have to figure out how hylomorphism answers the puzzle of the ship of Theseus.
Oh, okay.
Alright. New puzzle. Suppose I have a lump of clay. Is a lump of clay the same thing as a statue?
No.
Okay, so I have a lump of clay, and it's not a statue.
Right.
But then I make a statue of an elephant out of it.
Okay. Now it is a statue.
But is it the same lump of clay?
Of course it is.
So it both is, and isn't a statue.
Why?
Because after I make the elephant, it obviously is a statue, but it's also the same lump of clay as before, and a lump of clay is not the same thing as a statue. So it is and isn't a statue.
No. It's just changed. That's all.
Let me try to explain it this way. It's a lump of clay at first, right? Just a lump of clay.
Right.
So it does not have the characteristic, or the property, of being a statue.
Right.
But after I make the elephant, it's still the same lump of clay.
Right.
And it still doesn't have the property of not being a statue, because it's the same thing.
Oh. Okay.
Only now it does have the characteristic, or the property, of being a statue.
Okay.
So it both is and isn't a statue. It has the property of being a statue, but it also doesn't have the property of being a statue.
Well.
So it violates what the philosophers call Leibniz's law, the rule that a thing can't have and not have the same property at the same time. That's a big deal. Nothing can break Leibniz's law. All the philosophers agree on that.
You mean all philosophers actually agree on something?
Well, more or less.
Okay, when you put it like that, it sounds pretty confusing. But I think it all makes sense. You're talking about properties. Well, I think being a statue is a property.
What do you mean?
I mean that a statue isn't a thing. It's just a way a thing can be. Specifically, the way a lump of clay can be.
But you said a lump of clay is not the same thing as a statue.
Maybe I was wrong. It isn't always the same thing. But maybe sometimes it is the same thing.
So at one time the lump doesn't have the property of being a statue, but later it does. Its properties change.
Yeah, things can change, right?
Well, I for one think so. Some philosophers don't.
So did I just solve the statue puzzle?
I'll have to think about it some more some other time. Let's just say, you thought of a way to avoid the statue problem. At least, I think it would avoid the problem, but only if a lump of clay can be the same thing as a statue. Only if a statue isn't a thing itself. At least we can agree that, if a statue is itself a thing, then we do have a big puzzle here.
Right. We agree. So we have 2 puzzles, and maybe 3. Now what?
Now we look at some of the answers. At least, some of the solutions philosophers have attempted.
Bring it on.
First, there's eliminativism. That's the theory that these whole things don't exist. Only the parts exist.
So, there's no such thing as a statue.
Right.
But then there isn't any clay either. It's made of molecules.
Right. And the molecules don't exist either.
Because they're made of atoms. And the atoms are made of even smaller particles.
So they don't exist either. But the real atoms exist.
Come again?
In Greek, the word atom means the smallest particles, the indivisible particles.
So atoms are not atoms?
What we call atoms are not, etymologically, atoms. The word atom means the smallest particles, so small they can't be divided. Philosophers had been talking about atoms since before Socrates. Later, when scientists were studying some really small particles, I guess they thought they were atoms and called them that, and then they learned how to divide them. But the name stuck.
Okay.
So, back to eliminativism. The real atoms exist, but nothing else does.
So there's no ship of Theseus, and no anything else made of matter. Only the matter itself and, to be more accurate, only its smallest particles.
Whatever they actually are.
But we exist, right?
The eliminativists actually disagree on that. Peter Unger says we don't. Only the particles themselves, that's all. Peter Van Inwagen thinks living things also exist, and between them you'll find Trenton Merricks, who thinks only people exist, but they're all eliminativists about everything else. They say the ship, the statue, and all those other things made of particles don't exist. They're an illusion. We only think they exist.
But the whole thing is crazy, right? I mean, that desk exists, right? You would have to be crazy to say that it's not there, that it's not real.
Crazy? Maybe not, but definitely contrary to common sense. And that's the big problem with eliminativism. If you can look at a desk and know it exists, then eliminativists are wrong, clever, but wrong.
All right. What else is there?
Well, there's one idea from a philosopher named Roderick Chisholm.
That's a great philosopher name.
I know, right? But his theory has a terrible name. I think it's called mereological essentialism.
I'll let you manage the names. Okay?
Sure. So eliminativists think nothing made of parts exists, but Chisholm thinks they all exist. Not just all the things made of parts, but every version of those things exists, and is a distinct thing.
So the thing exists, and when you change out one of the particles, something still exists. But it's a different thing. The lump of clay exists, and the statue exists, but they're not the same things. And the ship of Theseus is really several ships of Theseus. It's a whole fleet. It's the fleet of Theseus.
You know, that's a really great name for it.
For them.
Right.
So, I think this theory is maybe even crazier than the last one.
Well, it's not very commonsensical, but that doesn't necessarily make it crazy.
Well, you know what? On second thoughts, I don't think this idea is as crazy as the last one. It's less crazy, but it's even more weird.
Might think the next option is even weirder.
Bring it on.
I call it intentionalism. That's the view that all these things exist, but they exist because we think they do. The difference between a bunch of planks and a ship is the fact that we think it's a ship.
So the ship of Theseus only exists in our minds?
Not necessarily. Maybe it exists outside of our minds, but it's the relation to our minds that makes the difference. Let's just say it exists because of our minds.
And that's how it survives changes. If the parts change, we think of the new set of particles as the old ship.
Right, it's particles, but it's not just a specific set of particles. It's the set of particles that we humans think of as a ship.
And who has this theory?
A few philosophers here and there. And I think if Martin Heidegger gave us an answer, this would be it, and maybe John Dewey.
Well, it's interesting, but what about rocks? You know, do they exist?
Not independently of us.
So if all human beings went into a coma,
everything else but those smallest, atomic particles would stop existing. According to intentionalism.
I wonder if you could play around with the theory a bit. Maybe a thing doesn't have to exist because we think it does, right now. Maybe the time doesn't matter. What matters is that, at some point, conscious beings think it exists.
I thought about that.
Seriously?
I'm a philosophy major, and I'll answer with something Alvine Plantinga said.
Okay.
So, if intentionalism is true, then, before there were any conscious beings, there were rocks and dinosaurs. But they didn't exist by themselves.
Unless the dinosaurs were conscious.
Well, say they were not conscious enough, that only human consciousness works. Or else, stick to just the rocks that were there before the dinosaurs.
Okay.
Then along came humans, and started studying them.
And then they started existing.
No, Then we made them so that they had always existed, if we use your suggestion that time doesn't matter.
Oh. Okay.
And that means that a bunch of geologists, just by thinking about rocks, made something happen in the past.
Yeah. That's a pretty awesome theory. But it's also really weird. I wonder, what if it was God's thoughts that made the difference, not ours?
Let's call that theory divine intentionalism. Assuming there's a God, it might work. It doesn't seem quite as weird. Maybe God's thoughts can make things exist more easily than ours.
And maybe God can affect the past. Or maybe that theory of Augustine and Aquinas is right, and God is outside of time.
Maybe so. But I don't remember seeing divine intentionalism anywhere, except maybe in George Berkeley.
Okay, so what's next?
A related theory that can be combined easily with intentionalism, and sometimes is. They call it the Constitution view. Now, let me see if I can remember. Yeah, Lynn Baker and David Wiggins are two philosophers with this theory.
And what do they think?
Well, they explicitly tell us that things aren't what they're made of. As they put it, constitution does not equal identity.
That seems weird.
Maybe, honestly, I can't tell anymore. I used to think it was obvious that things are what they're made of, but I can't tell anymore if that's what, well, what normal people think.
Dude, you forgot how normal people think, huh? Tough luck.
Philosophy major. Well, maybe I forgot. Maybe not. Like I said, I can't tell anymore. But I do still think things are what they're made of.
And Baker and Wiggins don't.
Right. But the big problem for their theory is that they think there are two things made of matter and occupying the same space and time.
Wait. I think I get it.
Yeah.
The statue and the clay. The ship and the set of planks. The thing and the set of its particles.
All distinct objects. There's the particles, and then there's the thing made of them.
What makes them different?
Something does. A property they have. An arrangement, even our thoughts. If you mix this theory with intentionalism, like Baker, for one, does, I think John Locke had this theory for organisms, though I think he agreed with Chisholm for inanimate objects.
Okay.
And for organisms Locke thinks it's the arrangement and the life that makes them different from their particles.
Okay.
The point is, this theory has it that the statue is not the same thing as the clay it's made of. It's a thing made of clay and having some extra property that the clay itself doesn't have.
That's crazy, though. Thinking two things exist in the same place at the same time.
Maybe. It's definitely not common sense. But maybe it's not crazy. Maybe it's just weird. But don't blame the philosopher if he thinks things are weird.
I know. Maybe things just are weird. Blame the world for being weird.
If we have to. But there's one more view to look at. Maybe the world isn't weird after all.
Right, one more theory. Hello, whatever.
Hylomorphism.
Yeah, that one.
Okay, this is my own view. In living philosophers there's also, Edward Feser and David O. Derberg.
Okay, I won't remember those names. Also, I think I forgot all the other ones you mentioned for the other theories.
That's fine. But you'll remember Aristotle.
This is his theory.
Oh yeah. But also Augustine and Aquinas. And I think Plato. Most of the big pre-modern philosophers.
Any moderns?
Not really. Descartes kind of killed hylomorphism off for a while.
And now it's back. A zombie theory.
I sure hope so.
So what is this theory, this hylomorphism?
It's the theory that physical objects aren't just physical. They're mixtures of matter and immaterial form.
Like Plato's forms?
Not exactly. But maybe there's a connection. I don't know. It's a topic for another day.
Okay, fine. But what kind of form then?
A better word might be essence, or nature. What makes the difference between a lump of clay and a statue is the statue-ness. What makes the difference between a pile of planks and a ship is the ship-ness.
And this ship-ness, or statue-ness, is a non-physical thing.
Right.
Is it the arrangement of the matter?
Not really. Thinking of the essence as the arrangement is a good way to misunderstand Aristotle. It includes the arrangement, but it's more than that. It's a reality itself. And it's an immaterial reality.
So, I would ask, why can't I see it? But I know what you'll say.
Because it's a non-physical reality.
But why should I think it's even there?
Because you know what a statue is, and you know it's not the same thing as its matter. The difference is that a material component of the thing.
And the difference between the planks and the ship is the immaterial component, the ship-ness.
Right. Now, take this TV stand. It exists, right?
Right.
And it's made of matter, right?
Right.
But if it's made of matter only, then neither eliminativism is right, and it doesn't exist after all.
Or some other theory is right, and something else about as weird is going on.
So there's a difference between the TV stand and the particles it's made of. And that difference isn't a myth, because the TV stand isn't a myth.
Okay.
So, since the difference is not a myth, it's also a real thing. And what it is the essence of a TV stand. That's what makes a bunch of particles into a real thing.
Okay.
And the essence is a real thing too, and is a part of the TV stand.
Okay.
And that's all hylomorphism is.
Well then, where are we? Can we summarize?
Yeah. Okay, so we have eliminativism, the theory that nothing exists, except the particles.
Right. And we have that other view, that lots of things exist, where we think there's only one thing.
Chisholm's view.
And we have the theory you call intentionalism.
Things are what we make of them.
Right.
And then we have divine intentionalism, and the Constitution view.
And hylomorphism. I can say it now.
Awesome.
I'm still a bit unclear why you believe that theory.
I'll try to explain. But let's go over some of the theories again, just 3 this time.
Okay. Which 3?
Eliminativism, the Constitution view, and hylomorphism.
All right.
There are a few questions it helps to ask, and see how the different theories answer them.
Okay.
First question. Is all that exists matter? Is materialism correct?
Okay.
And on this question, hylomorphism is the odd man out. Hylomorphism says no, and the other views say yes. Next question. Do things made of matter and only matter exist? Now the Constitution view is the odd man out. Hylomorphism and eliminativism agree. Things made of matter only can't exist.
Right.
Third question. Are things what they are made of?
Wait, I know this. The Constitution view says number.
And, again, hylomorphism and eliminativism agree. They say yes. Next question. Can 2 physical objects exist in the same place at the same time? Again, hylomorphism says no, and eliminativism too. The Constitution view says yes.
Right.
And the last question. Do those things even exist?
And here, eliminativism is the odd man out.
Right. The other views say yes, so the hylomorphist agrees with the eliminativist on nearly everything. They agree on what materialism means. It means that these objects can't exist.
But they disagree on whether they do exist.
Right.
Because they disagree on materialism.
Wrong.
What?
The eliminativist thinks things do not exist because he is a materialist. But the hylomorphist rejects materialism, because he thinks things do exist. You see, the hylomorphist and the eliminativist agree on the consequences of materialism.
It means things made of matter can't exist.
Right, and they also agree in sticking to some common sense principles.
Like, 2 physical objects don't exist in exactly the same place at exactly the same time, and we humans cannot change the past. And rocks do not exist because we are thinking about them.
Yeah. And the ship of Theseus isn't a whole fleet unto itself, but eliminativists are so committed to materialism that they're prepared to reject the biggest common sense principle of all.
That things exist.
Yup, those other theories keep that common sense principle, but they all reject another one.
So you think hylomorphism is the best theory because it keeps all the common sense principles?
Yeah.
But what about Occam's razor? Aren't you violating Occam's razor by saying these non-physical realities exist?
Occam's razor. Well, that's one of the rules for doing metaphysics for sure. It means you don't say more exists than you have to, but it's only one of the two golden rules for doing good metaphysics.
What's the other one?
Common sense. Look, you can't turn Occam's razor against common sense. It is itself a common sense principle.
But common sense can be wrong.
Sure. But I only reject it when there's good evidence against it, and, here, the evidence is for it.
But what about the evidence for materialism?
What about it? Materialism should be able to explain more if it's right. But it can't even explain the existence of disks without defying common sense. And then there's the problem of consciousness, and some other things materialism has a hard time explaining.
Well, some people think science is evidence for materialism.
I like science. But it can't explain how all is matter just because it does a good job explaining some physical things. Also, what we're talking about is the possibility that what science studies isn't even made of matter alone. And you know what? Maybe I like science even better than the materialists do.
How's that?
The thing is, I can do something most of the materialists can't do. Take a geologist for example.
Okay.
This guy studies rocks and talks about rocks, and he can hold up a rock and say it's so many years old, and it weighs this much, and it's a sedimentary rock or whatever.
All right.
And he thinks it's real, and it's the same rock it was 2 minutes ago, and 2,000 years ago, and it's only one rock, and he thinks it exists independently of our minds. And he thinks it was made by certain natural forces and not by our thoughts.
Okay.
And what I can do that those materialists can't do, is...
Yeah?
I can actually believe him, and I do believe him.
Awesome.
I think so.
So what about religion? You're Christian, right?
Right.
How does that work? Aristotle, and Jesus, and all that.
That's more books than I know how to write, or even read, but I did read one thing somewhere, just one thing. It's about the doctrine of the resurrection. There's an ancient puzzle about the resurrection and our particles.
Oh, right. I think I remember this. You die. Your body turns into dirt, then part of it turns into grass, then gets eaten by a cow. Then someone eats the cow, and then dies with some of your particles in his body.
And at the resurrection, who gets the particles?
Well, who does?
Let me ask you a question first. Is a fishbowl complete without water?
No.
So if I take the water out of a fishbowl, it's not complete?
It's not.
But if I put some water back in, it's complete.
Right.
Does it have to be the same water?
No.
Well, it's the same way with the resurrection. My body is a combination of matter and immaterial essence. It's a hylomorph.
That's a great word. Hylomorph.
I know, right? So, for me to be resurrected, I have to get some particles back, but it doesn't matter which ones. It only matters that there are enough of them. But particles aren't specific to a hylomorph. Particles are just particles.
But you have to get your own body back at the resurrection.
Don't worry. I will, but my body doesn't need any specific particles to exist. It just needs its own particles, and what makes a particle part of my body is it's being arranged and organized by my soul.
This immaterial component is your soul?
I think so. At least, I think Aquinas would give that answer. And I think he's probably right.
Okay, keep going.
So to be resurrected I need my own particles, but my particles will be whichever ones I get, just like a fishbowl needs its own water to be complete, but its own water is whatever water it gets.
Right. You cannot claim that a fishbowl needs the same water it used to have.
Water isn't specific like that. And neither are particles. Bodies are, but bodies are not matter alone. Bodies are hylomorphs.
Okay, and this hylomorph needs to go get some lunch. Thanks for the metaphysics lesson, but can we be done now?
Yeah. It was fun.
We'll talk about philosophy again on Monday?
I hope so.